Let me start by saying thank you, not just to Randall for inviting me, but to all of you who've made me so very welcome these last few days. And I'm doubly grateful for that because I've crossed the pond and I've also crossed the political divide because I didn't come to talk about housing because I was concerned to defend the free market. I came very much from the left, and in my mind it was a question of poor people being crushed by the system, let's say. But I don't say this to pick a fight because I'm disappointed in a way that how much I agree with Wendell Cox, who was over to talk to us earlier this year. I want to talk about the housing market in Britain. I've got my speech written here on the back of the piece of card that came in my shirt. And I had not an American dream, but I thought I was dreaming about an American the other day. I was listening to the radio as I was waking up, and the new president of the campaign to protect rural England is an American writer, Bill Bryson. You might have read Bill Bryson. He's not bad, I think, popular science writer, travel writer. And he made this speech to welcome, to thank people for making him the president of the council for the campaign for the protection of rural England. With this proposal, he had a proposal. He said, you know, I don't know why we don't turn the whole country into a national park. We'll turn the whole country, you know, England, he was flattering us. It's such a beautiful country. The whole place should be a national park, so you can, whatever you do, you'd have to get special permission to do it. So, you know, I have to be cautious on, you know, there is a bit of frisson between English people and Americans, and one of the obviously vile caricatures we have is of American tourists coming and saying, you know, gee, I wish I could wrap the whole thing up and take it home. And Bill Bryson's done it, you know, and I just want to explain a bit about, because we had a really great introduction from Mark Pennington about the Green Belt, and so I'm repeating a bit. Let's have a look at the Green Belt. There's the Green Belt. Well, you can work that out. It's not very hard to work out. Those white blobs in the middle, they're the cities, obviously, and there's the green belts that are constructed to stop them sprawling. That's the essence of the idea, to stop them sprawling, to prevent growth spreading out beyond the cities. But of course, Greenbelt isn't the only way that growth is constrained. I won't say stopped, but constrained in Britain. I'm just looking at England because the statistics are collated slightly different for Scotland and Wales. So there's the Greenbelt, but there's also, and it's true of course, there are some areas of outstanding natural beauty. You know, who's going to argue with that? You know, you can imagine like, no, I want areas of outstanding ugliness. But you know, so it's good. We earmark our areas of outstanding natural beauty. And there's birds. You know, I love birds, and you know, they're very beautiful and everything. A bit, you know. But somebody, you know, the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds is an important lobby. We love our birds. I don't want to be Philistine about it, but there are national parks, of course. There are national parks as well. You know, special areas have been set aside, a bit like your national parks, but I think this was well described in the previous talk, that it's not literally ownership, but regulation and control that makes it impossible, really, to have any kind of development within the national parks. I was on a radio show with the press officer of the campaign to protect rural England, and he said to me, James, surely you wouldn't build houses in the New Forest. You couldn't see development in the New Forest, which is ironic, really, because in history, the New Forest was once thickly populated with Anglo-Saxon houses, little cottages that Anglo-Saxons had built, that were all burnt down by William the Conqueror when he invaded us at the Norman Conquest, and turned it into a deer park just to rub our faces in it. So the reason the New Forest is as beautiful as it is because it's the site of, really, and ethnic cleansing operation back in 1066, and I mean they grew trees there since. But anyways, but there they are, the national parks, and that's good. We've got the national parks. Common land, you know, I know this is a weird historic thing that we have over in my country, the common land. That's to be protected. I mean, it's been reinvented in the modern era. They call it the commons, you know, the idea of the commons, that model. Local nature reserves, which are important too. Environmental stewardship schemes, which, you know, I mean, it's farming is allowed, but not development, because we're stewarding the environment there. Countryside stewardship schemes, and then environmentally sensitive areas. Well, of course, you know, some areas environmentally sensitive, I understand that. And thanks. And wetland sites, you know, we've got to look after our wetlands. It's really important. We get wet from time to time. And wildlife enhancement schemes and special conservation areas. I'm kind of struggling to remember now what the differences are, but so the Heritage Coast, well, yes, of course, the Heritage Coast, and the special protection areas and sites of blah, 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 and yeah, sorry, go back now, back to the Green Belt. There we are. Green Belt, well, I'm losing myself now. Green Belt again, there's the, just highlighted there, dark green, the Green Belt. And so, now then, listen, I don't want to give a surreal picture to you, because listening to me, you think like when you fly over to England, we are still going to be not even in our mud huts that William the Conqueror knocked over. Building does happen in the UK. These aren't absolute limits. They're regulations that control growth. Now, I want to talk about that because Green Belt, as a policy, was not a strict limit on growth. It wasn't designed to stop growth happening. What it was designed to do was to control growth, and it was essentially a political compromise between the Socialist Party, the Labour Party it's called, but the Socialists were keen to meet the demands of their constituents, which was to get more houses built after the Second World War, and the Conservative Party, which I suppose roughly your Republicans, but maybe a bit more conservative, and they wanted to make sure that there wasn't urban sprawl into their countryside, and that's you know, it was really about our country houses and estates not being encroached upon by your well, they called it bungaloid growth. They have these fantastic expressions at the time. Ribbon development was one of the kinder ones. The octopus, it's sometimes called the octopus. There was an intense, vile campaign of hate, really, a hate campaign against ordinary people getting homes. And that was what was going on. But I do want to stress that it did also allow for development. I walk away from the microphone. Around London, they built new towns. They did build new towns under this regulatory scheme. And those new towns, I mean, it's a mixed blessing. Some are better than others. We were hearing about, I was talking to a guy about Milton Keynes, which isn't the most attractive place in the world. But, you know, there was growth. And also, there was post-war housing growth. There was a time when the planning system, which was a directed regulatory system, was used to whip up more housing growth. In 1967, we had our best output. 400,000 plus homes were built in the year 1967, about half public housing, about half private. It was, I mean, I don't think you lot would like it, really, because it was a bit kind of socialistic and top-down, and a lot of it had to come down afterwards because it was rubbish. But, you know, some of it is okay too, and some people are living in those homes who are quite grateful for the fact that they built homes. Now, things changed because in 1997, this legal framework, the Green Belt, got a new content. It got a distinct political content when Lord Rogers of Riverside, that's Sir Richard Rogers, the architect, made some very, I mean, I think they're very good. I think Wendell might disagree, but very modernist buildings. But he's good as an architect, he is. He's an idiot when it comes to planning, and I don't think I'm being unreasonable here. And really, he didn't know what he was talking about. So, you know, he was an urbane, witty chap. He got lots of experts in to tell him, and the experts obviously reflected the prejudices of their times, which were not 1947 gentry protecting the countryside. They were 1997 environmentalists concerned with preservation of nature, all slightly modulated differently, but also like new urbanists who were extrapolating from a particular experience of their own, which was that it was true that there was a quite attractive gentrification of some of the inner city areas which had been run down. You know, Hoxton in the East End of London was a deprived area by any standing, but it became a kind of artists' quarter, kind of Soho type place, and it raised its game. It was really interesting. And they noticed that it was quite dense, obviously, because they're all single, basically, and 20-something HTML designers. And they thought, well, this is really cool and groovy. You know, London is back, and we can make the rest of the country like that. Well, of course, you can't make the rest of the people like that. You can't make the rest of the people have the same income. So you impose this schema derived from the creative class, the kind of new urbanists, and imposed it on people who are, you know, all living in other conditions, you know, with children and all that kind of, and driving and what have you. And they said, we will only build on brownfield land. There will be no greenfield development. Now, think about that. That means essentially that is a recipe for stasis. You mean you will only build on derelict land where buildings have been before. There will be no change. Time will stand still. They never thought through what it would mean is that obviously the number of homes being built collapsed. It absolutely collapsed. We have an estimate, a projection from back in 1996 of 4 million new homes we need because of population growth and household growth, different reasons. It's probably an underestimate, but let's say 400,000 new homes, 4 million new homes, which comes to 200,000 a year we need to build between 1996 and 2016. So we should be building 200,000 homes a year to accommodate this new growth. And promptly the building fell below that. Not so far below that, you know, so people were a bit relaxed. You know, it got to its worst at 160,000, which was the lowest post-war. That was in 2001. And I would argue with these people, and they'd say, well, look, we're building 160,000. It's not 200,000. I said, but I think you've made a simple mathematical mistake here, is that you've forgotten that as well as houses going up, they come down. And they'd completely forgotten to factor in the simple truth that you have to replace houses over time. And if we have 24 million dwellings in the UK, that means, and you expect them to stand for 100 years, well, that means you've got to build 240,000 every year to get the turnover of the housing stock. But that would mean that there would be no accommodation for new growth, and we wouldn't be meeting the building we need just to turn over our housing stock. We're not even doing that. You can look at it another way by looking at how many we actually knock down. We'd knock down 17,000 houses a year out of a housing stock of 24 million. That means to say that every house that gets built today is going to have to stand for 1,300 years. That's at the rate that we're replacing. They've got to stand for 1,300 years. Well, look, the obvious answer is they won't. But, you know, you think of, I mean, we've got books, you know, we know what it looked like 1,300 years ago. And I think there's about, you know, you could count on the fingers of 4 or 5 hands how many houses are standing that were built 1,300 years ago. So that's why we have the situation which you're advancing to as well, which is a very restricted supply, artificially restricted supply by this political control. One way of illustrating it is, what's the difference in value of land with planning permission and without? That makes it simple, so you can understand. What's the difference? Sir Peter Hall, the I don't think I've ennobled him. I think he's Sir Peter Hall, who's the eminent professor of town planning in the Town and Country Planning Association Journal, makes this estimate. The difference between 1 acre of land without planning permission and with, the value added is £1 million. £1 million, that's, let's say, $2 million, just shy of $2 million. So you can imagine that's what kind of imposition this thing is, and what a valuable political resource it is to withhold planning permission. Of course, and it's not direct corruption, but of course, planning authorities are keen to say, how can we get hold of the planning gain, and what will you developers, what will you pay us in local taxes and local schemes and developments, so that we will give you the planning permission. A complete kind of a trap. What does it mean for ordinary people? Of course, it means the prices went through the roof. You know, the prices tripled over the last 15 years of continuous house price growth. People are paying £220,000 for their homes on average. That's about $400,000. You know, and I bought a house recently, and I paid through the nose. It was £340,000 to live in London. And, you know, it's only a stroke of luck on the appreciation of the last place that we could even think of doing it. But I'm in hock for the rest of my life. And then there's this sickening moment, because you have to insure yourself against the house falling down, at which point you learn what it would cost to actually build the house. You know, what's the value of the bricks and mortar? That's out for £340,000. It's £60,000. So all the rest is the bidded up price. The social consequences are disastrous, because poor people cannot live in our inner cities. You know, they're being excluded. You know, William the Conqueror is back. Only he's called Lord Richard Rogers, and people are being driven out. Young people can't buy, and their parents have to buy their first homes for them. They have to remortgage their own homes. They've only just got paid off their mortgages. They have to remortgage their homes. We're in debt bondage. It's return to peonage in the United Kingdom. I mean, I obviously don't want to get carried away. Lots of these things, you know, we get by, you know, and you know, we're serving the mortgage and what have you, but we are facing a social problem. Our housing stock, because we're not locking it down, is the oldest in Europe. You know, Bill Bryson, they should turn the whole country into a national park. Bill, we did. And you can tell, you think our houses are quaint. They're just old. They're decrepit. We'd like some new ones. Thank you very much.